And we are back with another instalment of EOTK Insider with the lovely Neil Jones. How are you doing this morning, Neil?
I'm good, thanks, mate. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad at all. It's been a lovely start to the pre-season fixtures, a 4-2 win over Karlsruhe in Germany amid the German training camp. Just to kick things off, of course, because I assume you saw the fixture as well. What was your perspective on the moments that sort of defined the game, and in particular, I suppose, the performances of our sort of two new signings in either half?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was actually over in Germany. I went to the game and covered it. So it was pre-season fixture, to be honest. It was a really good atmosphere. New stadium, or newly renovated stadium, opening, 34,000 fans. Really, the noise was something else, really, for a pre-season game. And 6 goals, six pretty good goals as well. Nice to see Liverpool's forwards get on the score sheet. And yeah, like you say, the two new guys. I mean, you'd say it was a low key sort of first 45 each. Szoboszlai in the first half, Kelleher in the second. They didn't do anything extraordinary. They didn't do anything sort of out of what we expect from them. But they were very neat and tidy, and they looked very much like they were in sync with the team that they were playing in. Szoboszlai, you can tell straight away that he likes to have the ball at his feet. He likes to be on involved in the game and trying to probe and create and keep the ball moving. He looks like a good athlete as well, someone who can protect the ball. The good size on him. And McAllister, was everything that we've come to expect from him at Brighton. Really, really neat and tidy. One touch or two touch. Happy to lend the ball to people and get it back, and always in space to receive another pass, and ended up getting a nice little assist with a through ball for Thiago as well. So I think if you're talking about sort of baby steps, if you like, and the first steps into the new career, you couldn't have asked for much more. I actually grabbed a chat with Szoboszlai afterwards down in the tunnel area, and speaks good English, seems like a really confident guy, really, really self-assured. And he was talking about, sort of aiming high and making sure that Liverpool aren't, sort of falling into this cycle, if you like, of, we fell out of the Champions League. He said, as far as he's concerned, everything's on the table this season. Liverpool can go and achieve anything they want.
And during the game as well, I think one moment that sort of particularly sort of stood out, I think, was Trent sort of appearing to be played in the sort of number 6 position. I'm just thinking sort of more sort of long term. Is this something that the club are thinking about as a potential sort of long term solution, or was it just more of a case of, because there's this constant debate, isn't there, whether Trent should be started in midfield or whether we're getting the best out of him by keeping him in that right back position and sort of moving into that space in midfield where we can use his creative attributes.
Yeah, I mean, I think for this game, I think more likely it was just the fact that who was available and who wasn't available. Obviously, there was things rumbling off the field, and meant that Jordan Henderson and Fabinho weren't there. There was injuries to Thiago and Stefan Bajcetic, which meant they couldn't feature. Curtis Jones and Harvey Elliott weren't yet joined up with the squad. So there's six midfielders missing already, and you're looking to field two sides, got two different 11s. So it was more of a necessity, really. And it was interesting, obviously, that Liverpool played the first half with that. It wasn't with the box that we've expected with Trent. When he's in midfield, it was with the 4-3-3. It was a very, unlikely midfield three, if you like, with Alexander Arnold, with Szoboszlai, and with Bobby Clark. But I think they have to be considering it as an option. That they don't have a great deal of obvious solutions at the moment. They don't have anything that you're saying, well, that's the route that they've got to go down, or the route that they're definitely going down. I think everything's still a little bit up in the air with what they're going to do with the midfield, and in particular with the number 6 position, or the deeper line midfield position. I think you saw a bit of both with Trent again in that first half. You saw what he can bring. Lovely when he gets loads of touches and he keeps the ball, taking over, and he can switch the play and he can do these things. But you also have to be very adept playing under pressure with your back to play sometimes, and just bouncing it back to people, and making your mind up quickly before you've received the ball, and being willing to win free kicks and things like that. And I don't think they're necessarily strengths of Alexander Arnold's. I think he can sometimes he thrives when the game's ahead of him, doesn't he? And he's looking forward. So that would be something he'd have to adapt to. But I think in the shorter term, I think we'll see a little bit more of it in the coming days and weeks with the friendlies that are coming up. But I think in the longer term, Liverpool really need to find a solution that they're happy with, which involves either Alexander-Arnold doing that hybrid role, dipping in and out of right back in midfield, or they're buying someone that plays that Fabinho role. And I think really the likelier option of the two is the latter.
I mean, we're certainly going to dive into transfers very shortly. It's what's everyone's talking about these days. I just wanted to quickly touch upon, because you mentioned injuries, and the reports circulating around Szoboszlai's own injury, I think a rolled ankle or something along those lines, and the possibility that he might miss the behind closed doors friendly with Firth. Is that accurate? Will the club be careful with him, or is it just very much a minor injury and we'll see him back in training quite soon?
Well, hopefully, yeah. I mean, the good news is obviously it's a sort of a rolled ankle as opposed to a pulled calf or a hamstring problem or something like that, which you would be really worried about going into the new season. Obviously, at this stage, he hasn't trained Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so I wouldn't expect him to feature against Greuther Fürth later today. It's got to be a minor concern. Liverpool have played it down in terms of a long-term issue, and it doesn't sound like it is something that's longer term, but it's got to be a concern because any training session, any chance to sort of get to know his teammates a bit more and get minutes on the pitch and things like that is gonna be felt at this stage of the season. And it would be frustrating for the player as well. He was obviously very upbeat after making his debut on Wednesday. He was looking forward to the next, and I would imagine maybe not fourth, but certainly when we go to Singapore, you might see that 60 minutes, 70 minutes become the norm for some of the first team players, and that might cost them that. But I don't think. Listen, last summer we had, I think it was Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain pulled his hamstring, Diogo Jota pulled his hamstring, and they were sort of 2-3 month injuries. I don't think we're in that territory. I think it's more a couple of days of training. And you have to remember, Alisson Becker didn't play on Wednesday. I think he's back in training. So Liverpool are happy to be sort of careful with players around this time.
Brilliant stuff. We're certainly all looking forward to seeing a bit more of Szoboszlai in the coming weeks. Moving on to transfers, and I'm afraid it is a bit of a bizarre story to kick things off with. I don't know if you heard about this in the reports circulating from Saudi around Fabinho's transfer. There was some suggesting that the move could be in jeopardy due to the country's laws around dangerous dog breeds. And of course, Fabinho himself possesses 2 French bulldogs. Seems a bit too nuts to be accurate, but you never really know nowadays. What have you been hearing on this particular story?
Yeah, well, nothing. I mean, I can't. Talking about dogs in Saudi Arabia just isn't, it's not something that's crossed my radar. All I can say is what's happened with Liverpool, and the deal is agreed between the clubs. Liverpool are expecting the deal to get done. There's obviously a hold up of some sort. I mean, whether it's payment plans or contracts or whatever, or whether it's dangerous dogs, that's we'll have to wait and see. But I mean, these kind of stories often emerge, when there's a delay in sort of a deal or a delay in official announcements. It would be a new one, wouldn't it? It would be a new one to sort of cost the transfer. I don't think I've ever heard anything quite like that. We've heard some U-turns and clubs sort of changing their hearts, or players changing their hearts. Liverpool have been involved in a few of those, haven't they? With Nabil Fekir and Steven Gerrard with a U-turn when he was going to Chelsea. I can remember not even longer ago, Lee Bowyer looked like he was going to sign once upon a time from Leeds, and Liverpool pulled the plug. But this one, I think we just have to wait and see. It would certainly be a brand new. It'd be one of those ones that would go in quiz questions, wouldn't it? Or they go in sort of these listicles that we get about the strangest ever transfer collapses. If it was about a player and an agent and a club not doing their due diligence on something like that.
No, I certainly don't think if we told the next generation of Liverpool fans why that transfer collapsed, I don't think anyone would really believe us until we showed them a Wikipedia page or something. Yeah. I mean, these 2 deals do look, Henderson and Fabinho, they do look almost certain to happen really at this stage. I just want to get the perspective really, from the club's decision makers. are they thinking, is it just going to be one more midfielder? Because, I mean, in my mind, it has to be two. You know, I think we were at the stage where they were mulling over a third when we had Henderson, Fabinho in the side. What are their exact plans?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Yeah, Henderson is all but done. I think it'll get completed this week. He completed the medical on Friday, Saturday. The contract's agreed, the fees agreed, so there's not much to stop it now, barring sort of last minute paperwork and announcements and things like that. So I think we're looking at both of them leaving. I think the club will look. I think it'll depend on what they settle on in terms of the player or the type of player. If they were to buy, let's just say they were to spend 100 million on a player, that might just be the one that they choose. If they were to spend less, then they might look at doing a more experienced one and a younger one. And I think that's probably the most likely. Then it'll be two signings. Again, we talk about Alexander-Arnold. If they do decide that he's the midfield man, then it could be a right back and a midfielder that they look to sign, or someone who can play a little bit of right back and midfield. So I don't think it's wise, and I think it's a trap for someone like me to say, oh, they're going to buy two, or they're going to buy three, or they're going to buy one. I think there's a lot of parts that could change with it. It depends what's available. And listen, if you're looking at what's been linked with Liverpool over the last few weeks or the last few days, it's not an inspiring list of names, is it? It's not something that you go, well, you have to push the boat out to get them. It's Liverpool finding a solution that's imperfect, with a bit of time constraints on it. So it isn't an ideal situation they find themselves in. I know Jürgen gave an interview on Friday where he sort of said, trust us, we'll get it right. And I think, it's fair enough for him to ask that, but we'll have to wait and see what Liverpool do, because I don't have a great deal of faith that they're going to come out of this window stronger than they went into it, or certainly say stronger than they went into it when they'd only signed McAllister and Szoboszlai. I think Liverpool will be weaker, or there's a good chance that Liverpool will be weaker when the season starts, because it'll be really hard to replace Fabinho and Henderson, both as players and as people who are on top of Liverpool's style, tactics, way they play, unless they pull something really, really good out the bag, and they might do.
I think imperfect is the perfect description, really, especially, as you say, you look at the names being linked, from João Paulinho, Cheick, Doucoure, Romeo Lavia. They're all sort of signings that potentially, especially the younger pair, could be brilliant Liverpool signings in the future, but you're looking at the developmental cost rather than sort of an instant fit. We'll start with Romeo Lavia at the minute, because we've seen everything from odds being slashed on him signing for Liverpool. Is this very much still the player that Liverpool are focusing on at the most? Do you get the impression for that holding midfield role? I mean, it's been reported, obviously, we're trying to lower his 50 million asking price, but we're 3 weeks away from Stamford Bridge, aren't we? So, I think whilst there will certainly be an emphasis on Liverpool being calm about this, ideally, and I certainly imagine from Klopp's perspective, we want to get whoever, especially in that position, whoever he wants there quite soon in to work with them in pre-season before we kick off on a particularly difficult game against a new manager who could quite easily have reinvigorated a struggling Chelsea side by that point.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to say that Lavia is the one that Liverpool want above all others. I mean, he's the one that they wanted in a different world, when they had a different side build around, and that would have been one I think that would have been being focused on at this point. The world's changed. They've lost 700 games, and to replace him with a 19-year-old would be a risk. I don't think it's beyond the realms that Liverpool do ask him to come in, or that they do try and sign him. But I think what's clear is that they probably need to get someone else if they do, because it's too much to put on any young player to come in and replace the club captain and a Brazil international who's played 200 games, plays 40 games a season, and does so in a role that's so demanding, not just physically and technically, but tactically as well, and mentally. And you have to be so strong, and you have to be so consistent. It just feels like it would be a huge ask just to get Lavia. So the reason or one of the reasons why you wouldn't expect Liverpool to sort of just go, right, okay, let's push the button on Lavia, is because they don't know who else they're going to be bringing in at this moment. So if you go and spend 50 million on Lavia, and that does your budget, and all of a sudden a player that actually can do it here and now is available, but you haven't got the money because you've spent it on Lavia, then you've painted yourself into another corner. So I think Liverpool will carry on negotiating. I think if there's a deal to be done with, which is at a good fee, good, obviously the wages I don't think will be an issue with someone like Lavia, but if the fee's a good fee, which Liverpool think, well, do you know what, that's too good to turn down, the long term 30 million or 35 million, whatever the sort of number that they settle upon, then I think they will consider doing it. But they absolutely, I can't see a world where Liverpool ask Romeo Lavia to fill the void left by Jordan Henderson and Fabinho. It would be unfair on the young lads. It would be unfair on it'd be unfair on him more than anyone else, because it's been such an important position. So I think Lavia, to me, feels like it would be him plus one as opposed to him.
No, that's the thing. I suppose it's a crazy thing of this window, isn't it? We're at that stage really where we're going to have to put pressure on someone to do that. I think probably the name that sort of seems, I mean, we talked about Florentino Luis last week, a really good profile, as you mentioned, more someone you'd look at as a like-for-like replacement for Fabinho. One name that I sort of looked into and I thought this probably makes, it would feel like a Liverpool signing, would be Crystal Palace's Cheick Doucoure. As we've seen, of course, Palace obviously bought him last summer from Lens, so this is a player they're not going to want to let go cheaply, as is their right, especially after I think the fans named him their player of the season. We've seen figures of around, I think 50 million was initially quoted, and I think it's been since clarified around sort of 70 million. But then we're talking about a player that is 23 years of age now, as opposed to Lavia at 19 years of age. Would 70 million for Liverpool be as much of an obstacle for a player like Doucoure as 50 million would be for a 19-year-old Lavia?
Yes, I think it would. I mean, you would be talking about Cheick Doucoure becoming Liverpool's second or third most expensive player at 70 million. I think that obviously Palace put out, or Palace sort of sources put out that that's the fee, and I'm guessing that's high end, sort of. As clubs do that, don't they? I think a lot of people. We saw stories about Alexis McAllister, that he was going to be this much. We've seen Caicedo was going to be 100 odd million. It looks like it'll be less than that. Even Declan Rice, really. I mean, it got to a crazy fee, but I think West Ham were asking for more than that at one point. So there's always this negotiating tactic. The thing with Doucoure is I can't say that he registered on my radar a lot last season. He was part of a Palace side that was pretty ordinary for the most part. And then obviously got a good boost when they got a manager change sort of in the spring. But he wasn't a player that I watched and thought he looked obviously that he was going to go higher than Palace, or that he was going to move through. When you watch Palace, maybe your eyes are drawn to other players a little bit, with Olise and Eberechi Eze and Wolf Zaha and people like that. But yeah, you're right. He's 23. He's got a year of experience in the Premier League. He was obviously done well before that over in France. He's an international. He's profile-wise, he does well in defensive metrics, I think, in particular in sort of stopping counter attacks and winning possession back in his own defensive third. People would have questions about him on the ball. Easy to forget sometimes with Jordan Henderson, with Fabinho, but they would often have 90, 95 touches of the ball a game, and passing accuracy sort of over 85, 80%. So you have to be good on the ball to play in that position for Liverpool. I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether Doucoure could make that leap, or whether it would take a while for him to do it. Possibly he could. As I say, I couldn't say I know him inside out. But yeah, I mean, in an imperfect sort of set of solutions, if you're looking at someone who's sort of obviously physically adept, defensively adept, that has played in the Premier League and is available, well, that you have to sort of at least ask. You have to put them in the list, and you have to ask the questions. The question, or the bigger question, I think, would be over the levels, and whether it's a player that's capable of stepping up. It's not someone it's not someone I've sort of seen earmarked as being, well, he's just passed it through Palace. He's going to the very top of the game. It feels like someone who's sort of the club have circled back to a little bit after being left in a bit of a hole.
I mean, you mentioned about sort of players that sort of instantly draw the eye around the Premier League. I mean, the other name that has drawn plaudits, it would be perhaps Fulham's João Palhinha, certainly an older option. I think we've seen reports suggesting that Fulham would be looking for around 60 million euros.
Yeah, I think you can rule that one out, can't we? Quite safely. He dislocated his shoulder last night playing against Brentford in the Premier League International Cup. So I would have been surprised anyway at that price and that age. But I think with a dislocated shoulder to throw into the mix, I think we can sort of rule that one out. Liverpool and I think West Ham was the other team that were quite strongly linked. It would be a bizarre move for Liverpool to sort of put their eggs in an 80 million or whatever £million player that can't play.
I mean, I suppose it shortens the list of sort of available options Liverpool have now. I mean, you mentioned just before I even asked you about Doucoure or even Lavia that none of the options seem massively inspiring. There isn't that one name you look at and go, Christ, we get him. Forget about it. That's a sort. Is there any sort of eventuality that you look at from the available options, perhaps some other names that haven't been directly linked but you've seen and think would be a good fit? Is there any eventuality Liverpool could meet that would make you feel more optimistic about the season coming ahead, or do you sort of feel the names that are there, those are the names and that's it? Just pick your best option.
No, I don't. I think there's far more that we won't know about. No, there's no way that we know all of the players Liverpool are looking at or the plates that Liverpool are spinning. There'll be a lot of players that questions have been asked about or opportunities may emerge. This one, we didn't know about Dominic Szoboszlai until a few days before he signed. So it would be pretty arrogant of me to say, oh no, we've got Liverpool's 5-man shortlist or 6-man shortlist, whatever it is. So of course there are players. Listen, if Liverpool were to sign Moises Caicedo, only Moises Caicedo, I would be so optimistic about Liverpool's chances for this season. I think he'd be the perfect sign. If they were to sign Aurelien Tchouameni from Real Madrid, I would be very optimistic about it. Whether they will or not, I would say probably not. But there are worlds where Liverpool can sort of move things around and surprise you. They've done it before. They've expedited moves for players. Gakpo, Luis Diaz, they moved pretty quickly for Darwin Núñez when there wasn't a huge sort of 3-month saga of developing around that. They went and got it done. You remember when they signed Fabinho himself, was one that came almost completely out of left field. No one really had sort of considered that Liverpool might get that deal done. So there are surprise moves that can come up, and there are players that can make Liverpool better. If you were asking me about the ones that I've seen, I think I said on last week's show, we sort of looked at sort of someone like Amrabat with a Lavia or a Gravenberch alongside might be a sort of a longer term option that could give a little bit of room to the younger player to develop and become a real first team star. But I think personally, I mean, I wrote about this last week, but I think Liverpool really need to be at risk in making themselves look stupid almost by asking questions about the very best who are out there. And there aren't very many obvious options, but there are players there that are playing at a high level who, money potentially and a really strong pitch could potentially turn their head and turn towards Anfield. So I would like Liverpool, if they aren't already, I'd like them to be in the mix for Caicedo. I'd like them to be sort of asking, what can we do? What can we offer you? Do you want to be the centerpiece of our team? Do you want to be our sort of, come and play with your mate Alexis? Do you want to be play under Klopp? Don't wait for Chelsea. They're not even in the Europa League. I would like Liverpool to be doing those kind of things. I'm sure behind the scenes somewhere they are doing those kind of things, or they have done in the past. But yeah, you're right. If you look at the list, it's sort of. I mean, I even think that with Lavia, to be honest. I think Lavia is a player of potential, really do. But he doesn't. He isn't one that's grabbed me as the sort of wow, like, in a way that someone like Bellingham or Tchouaméni have in the past, or, players like that, where you're looking and saying, wow, like, he's the next superstar of midfield. To me, he looks like a player who could be a decent player, a more than decent player. And the rest alongside him, Calvin Phillips and Gravenberch and Amrabat are sort of players that are just, imperfect.
No, the Caicedo one's an interesting shout. I think especially the longer the difficulties around that deal between Chelsea and Brighton sort of play out, you do wonder, why aren't Liverpool getting involved here? I know there were sort of prior issues in terms of, I think there were some issues of sort of character raised around his, I think, the sort of mini strop he had over a potential exit, but then the contract got sorted in the end. I think Roberto De Zerbi was speaking about it, made it very clear, look, it's not me you have to convince. I think he'll be here for another year. It's Tony Bloom you need to convince. And do you think that's probably going to be fee in excess of £70 million? But then you look at Caicedo and you think, well, this is a player that's evidently ready to go now. The quality is there. He still also has potential to realise that this seems like such an obvious home run for a club in the Premier League. I suppose you do almost wonder why Liverpool aren't doing it.
The money is astronomical, isn't it? I mean, that Liverpool have never signed a midfielder for that much money, have they? And the wages will be huge. He was going to go to Arsenal in January, or wanted to go to Arsenal. He signed a new contract, a 5-year contract, I think. And now Chelsea are in the mix. So it isn't going to be a case of £70 million. Yeah, it's going to be £70 million plus, a 5-year contract, 6-year contract on a lot of money as well. So the financials are huge. That's the reason Liverpool aren't, I would say, in the mix in the sense of, competing with, and also Chelsea, you know what Chelsea are like as well. It could easily be a case where you make the offer, you convince the player, and Chelsea say, okay, we'll put £10 million on top of that to Brighton, and we'll put X amount to the agents, and we'll do this. So those are the reasons Liverpool don't like getting involved in bidding wars and sort of beauty contests, if you like, in terms of showing that they're the ones. But in terms of the player, it's you're right. It's a no-brainer for someone like Liverpool. It makes Liverpool better instantly. It's someone who can play a couple of positions. It's someone who's 21 and has got potential to get better and better. And I think it's someone who's proven that they're one of the best midfielders in the Premier League and potentially could be, further afield.
I suppose this is the thing, isn't it? I think when we talk about names like Lavia, I think you can see a world where this player becomes absolutely phenomenal. A few years coaching under Klopp, but I suppose we're almost at the risk here, where as you say, none of the names are hugely inspiring beyond maybe a Caicedo, beyond a Tchouaméni, and you look at it and think, well, not is this another throwaway season for Liverpool? But after the season Liverpool just had, I think everyone was sort of thinking, okay, this one's going to be better. This is going to be a progression. Obviously, the landscape has changed. I don't think anyone was expecting Saudi would come in and bid for one of our two most senior midfielders. But you're almost looking at next season and thinking, God, this is going to be, could this be another one where Liverpool almost have to get out of the way, especially if they're developing a younger player like a Lavia to fit into that sort of specialist holding six role. We discussed about incomings. I just want to quickly touch on a few sort of potential exits. We've seen plenty of reports around Thiago's future. Sevilla, Real Sociedad have been linked from Spain. Reports of Saudi interests have also been touted. Spain would seem perhaps the most natural option, perhaps the most favourable option to Thiago and his family. Is this a serious possibility for the player?
Yeah, I suppose there's a couple of questions now. Is would Liverpool be as keen to let him go, given what they've lost already? It is easy to forget, isn't it? We sort of, I think we get into the habit of losing our temper with players a little bit who get injured and sort of saying, well, forget about them. They're no longer. But Thiago's a good player, Thiago, if he's on the pitch for Liverpool, can be quite influential and has been quite influential. So if you were to lose him as well, I think he would. I think you'd be sort of, you'd be taking a match to some of your your stock really. You know, in midfield options, you wouldn't be leaving yourself in a great position so close to the new season. There was interest obviously early in the summer from Turkey and from Saudi Arabia, which was serious. By all accounts, Thiago refused that interest on the grounds that he wanted to stay and be part of Liverpool and see out the last year of his contract. I haven't heard anything to suggest that's changed. He's just back towards full training. I'm not sure if he'll feature in today's game, but I think you'd be looking at the Singapore trip and you'd be expected to play in those games. I think there's a possibility. There's a possibility if he was to say that he wanted to leave, that Liverpool might, but that would leave Liverpool with even more work to do, and it would be a really imperfect situation. Really, you know, you'd be looking at the amount of experience they'd be saying goodbye to would be crazy. It might. I mean, I think then you would be in the territory of sort of writing off the season almost and saying, well, you know, this is a season of transition while we're just bedding in these 4 or 5 new midfield players or this entirely new midfield unit. It would feel crazy, to be honest. I expected Thiago to leave at the start of the summer, but that was long before the idea of Fabinho and Henderson gone was ever floated. I would lean towards him probably staying around for another year and then leaving on a free at the end of next season.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, to be honest. Now that you've left Fabinho and Jordan Henderson go, you can't really afford to let a third senior midfielder. I think we were talking Liverpool bringing in another midfielder when we had Fabinho and Jordan Henderson. Now we're talking about replacing those two. It's too much work. It's far too much work for Liverpool to do in one window, especially thinking, well, you're probably not going to be getting 40 million for Thiago as you would for a Fabinho. Do you know what I mean? It's probably going to be more than that.
And you have to remember as well, it's not impossible to get better players than those three. It's unlikely to get better players than those three. One of them. It's almost impossible to get better players than those three. All three in the same window. You know, you are the sort of hit rate with transfers tends to be sort of, you know, maybe 2/3 or less. So it would be. Liverpool would have to get really lucky if they got an upgrade on Fabinho, an upgrade on Henderson, an upgrade on Thiago in the same window. They would. I think the only thing that they could really do is get good players in who can be fitted in and sort of, you know, if they're not going down the route of getting a sort of a marquee player that's going to come in and really sort of hit the ground running. The best they can do is sort of get decent players in that probably aren't going to be as good 1v1 or are going to be less consistent or are going to be a little bit less, you know, finished article players. So it does. I mean, I still think it's quite exciting that Liverpool are going to look so different, but you have to remember that, you know, for all of the struggles that we had with Fabinho last season, he still played a lot of games. For all the struggles we had with Jordan Henderson, he still played a lot of games. Thiago, you know, still does things on the pitch that a few players can do and would be missed. And we know that their level when they are playing well is higher than most midfielders in world football. So it is a huge ask sort of to replace those players. That's why, you know, we're waiting with bated breath, aren't we, really, and seeing what Jürgen and the team do. No,
absolutely. I think we can feel some concern about how we're going to replace these players, but, you know, I think, like you said, it's still ripe to feel excited about it too, because this is a period of major change. And I think you look at this Liverpool side and, you know, the changed the age profile, the age complexion of that midfield, and you think, my God, you know, this is really the forward line, the midfield. Yeah, there are questions all going around the back line, which we won't have time for today. But I think on the whole, Liverpool are sort of a rising force. How they rise next season is something to be debated.
Look, I mean, listen, I mean, I can speak for myself on this. When Liverpool signed Philippe Coutinho, I thought, well, that's just a sign. That's, you know, that they signed a name that was good a couple of years ago. He's not, you know, and look what he turned out. When they signed Daniel Sturridge, I thought, you know, like, he's not that good. He's Chelsea. When they signed Andy Robertson, I thought, well, there's another one to add to the list of left backs that aren't good enough to play for Liverpool. Gini Wijnaldum, I was like, well, how've they ended up with him? You know, like, just been relegated from Newcastle. You know, Joel Matip on a free transfer. Sadio Mane to a degree, where you're looking at and saying, well, yeah, Southampton, you know, I'm not sure. You know, Shaqiri, these players they might not be your sort of signing, but Liverpool can still build. Jurgen Klopp has proven that he can build a good team and he can make players better. So you have to give him that sense of, trust and responsibility that he's going to do that. I think just the one thing is that probably aside from Coutinho, he's never had to do it so sort of unexpectedly, if you like. There's always been an element of planning around it. There's always been this, right, okay, who do we need? Right, we need that kind of player. We need that kind of player. This is a different situation where this is right. We've done that, and all of a sudden someone said, by the way, we're going to take that little piece of the jigsaw out as well. So this is a new situation for him to prove himself in. But if anyone sort of has proven that they'll make the best of a bad situation, it's Jurgen Klopp and Liverpool, isn't it? So fingers crossed they do. It's just that until we see who it is and what it is and what the sort of system is. Listen, it could be the Liverpool go and buy a brand new centre back, go 3 at the back and play Trent in midfield, and we go, oh wow, this looks completely different. It could be that they go, right, we're going to put all our money down for Frankie de Jong or Joshua Kimmich or Tchouaméni or whoever, and we're going to just absolutely go on the Manchester United route of where they sign Casemiro, and we just say we're going to get the best that's available. They might just go on a couple of gambles. History tells you they're probably likelier to get a couple of players that some fans think, I wouldn't have bought him, and Klopp can turn him into an absolute diamond. It could be Lavia, Gravenberch, it could be anyone. So I think Klopp's request for trust is absolutely should be listened to. It's just that obviously it'd be quite nice if it was done by the time Liverpool take to the field at Stamford Bridge. And what are we talking here? We're talking 20 days.
It's a little scary, isn't it? I mean, you're absolutely right. I think we're not even thinking about even the system changes that would ease that transition. And I think the other point is, I think that's as you've mentioned. I think I was talking about with a friend actually before. Could you imagine if we were dealing with this problem without our current recruitment team, without Jurgen Klopp? It's a very bleak picture, really, by that point. Just lastly, I think one name I wanted to touch upon. It's one name I certainly wouldn't want Liverpool to lose, but I could understand if it happens. It is that of Kelleher. Wolves will reportedly launch a bid with the same report, I think, coming from the Daily Mail, might be suggesting that Jose Sarr could leave this summer. Obviously, this is a player that Jurgen Klopp doesn't want to leave, and Liverpool will demand a fair price here. What bid would Liverpool be prepared to release a player of this quality? Because it does actually astound me, especially when I think I look across the league and say a Tottenham, for instance, with Hugo Lloris' situation. I'm astounded that a reasonably big club hasn't come in for a player of Kelleher's quality. Because you look at a player that wasn't phased at all by the prospect of covering for Alisson Becker in the Champions League, wasn't phased about covering for Alisson Becker in the Premier League. I think you could argue, well, he's just popped in here and there. But I think, this is a player that I think has proven over the last few years that, he is a safe pair of hands. I don't think anyone's suggesting he's Alisson Becker level of quality, but this is certainly a very, very good goalkeeper. And I would argue top half of the Premier League, at least, if not a Champions League club.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think maybe there's an element that clubs would rather see him on a weekly basis, and I could understand that. We talk about, I talk about Lavia, don't I, and say he's played 30 odd games, and Kelleher has played less than that. So I can understand why your club would say, yeah, we think he's a really good goalkeeper, but if we're talking about paying a decent fee for him, we'd rather see him playing Saturday, Wednesday, and seeing how he responds when he makes a mistake and he isn't taking out the team or something like that. I don't know. I wouldn't like to guess, but I would imagine he hasn't played more than a handful of games in a row, maybe even 3 or 4 in his career, which, for a goalkeeper, I think is quite significant. You do have who are the best goalkeepers. The best goalkeepers are the ones who we say are consistent, aren't we? And like you say, we only really see Kelleher sort of every couple of months. I do think style-wise, I think he suits an awful lot of teams in the Premier League. You look at, I watched Brighton last season. He's a better goalkeeper than Jason Steele, who was in goal for Brighton at the back end of last season. And a similar style as well, really good on the ball, can pass, never phased, decent height. I look at, Chelsea paid how much money, to sign Kepa. I don't see a huge sort of difference there when I watch the two goalkeepers combined. I don't look and think, well, if Liverpool had Kepa, they'd be better. Or if, but it just looks like a like for like almost. So yeah, there are clubs in the Premier League I think that he would suit. I think it will depend. I mean, Wolves would be one, wouldn't it? Wolves would be a decent sort of size club, decent ambitions, obviously good fan base and crowd. If you were to get your first move sort of away from Liverpool, Wolves wouldn't be a terrible one to get. I think the fee, I think from a Liverpool point of view, it'd have to make a lot of sense. It'd have to be 20 million, I would imagine, close to or above. They've got a lot of goalkeepers over in Germany at the moment, haven't they? You know, don't forget sort of Vitiaros, who was in goal in the second half on Wednesday. You know, he was part of the Czech Republic side of the under 21s Euros. He's obviously a talented keeper as well. They've obviously got, you know, younger lads like Pitaluga and Fabian Rojek, and then Adrian's still there. But Liverpool would have to replace, I think, Kelleher. If he was to go, they'd have to get in a second choice goalkeeper. So yeah, the deal would have to make sense financially for that, you know, to allow Liverpool to do what they've got to do already, and also to replace their backup goalkeeper.
Well, there you have it. I think we're inching ever closer now to the Premier League season. So it's an exciting but scary time for Liverpool, and what better time really than to catch your own content, Neil, on your own Substack at neilj.substack.com, and we can also find you on Twitter at Neil Jones Goal. Likewise, if you're watching this on Empire's YouTube, be sure to drop us a like, share your thoughts on Liverpool's transfer window in the comment section, and hit that subscribe button. And don't worry at all, you can catch Neil's full column here on our Substack at empireofthecop.substack.com, and an audio version on the same platform. Neil, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on again on EOTK Insider. Thank you for watching. This has been Empire of the Cop at EOTK Insider. Take care.